How well do you know the back of your own hand? Interestingly, those at risk of lymphedema or with lymphedema are at best unreliable at first detecting lymphedema, and secondly, when they have got lymphedema, knowing whether or not it's improving or getting worse over time. As most of you know, lymphedema is a potential complication of cancer and its treatment. As a lymphedema therapist, I'm very much aware that the need for accurate assessment sits with the therapist in view of the fact that the patient is quite inaccurate at reporting what change is happening. So I undertook this investigation to look at what outcomes are currently being used to monitor and assess change, and look at how we can improve that data. When lymphedema develops, the most obvious change is an increase in size of the affected region. However, other changes are occurring from the earliest stages, and those changes are generally a thickening of the skin, an increase in fatty tissue, and also there are associated feelings of heaviness and other patient-reported symptoms which accompany or predate those observable signs. To see how change is captured when assessing lymphedema, I undertook 2 studies. One was a qualitative study where I visited 14 lymphedema therapists across New South Wales from public and private settings to just look at how they measure and report change. So I initially looked at them actually with their clients doing their assessments, and then interviewed them after that to talk to them about how they use that data. Most used 2 physical measures. All of them used circumference measures, but quite a few used bioimpedance spectroscopy as well. But they also reported outcomes on how the edema felt, how it looked, and also how the patient, what the patient's symptom was. There were, however, significant differences in the measurement protocols that were followed and how they were reported. The language especially was quite different across different settings. The other study was a systematic review looking at how researchers measure and report change in lymphedema. This revealed a focus on size change to the detriment of the other tissue changes and the self-reported symptoms. To measure size, they used circumference measures, but they also used things like water displacement, perometry, DEXA, and quite high-tech equipment. 53 of the 55 studies reported size changes, and this outcome was reported in a startling variety of absolute and relative ways. And to investigate whether or not there was any agreement on what constitutes a clinically relevant change, I looked at whether or not thresholds for change had been established before the study was undertaken. 20 different thresholds were cited in the 21 studies where a threshold for change was set. So these factors have contributed to the very poor evidence base we currently have for lymphedema treatment. With such a breadth of outcomes and reporting, a Delfy study was then undertaken to narrow the outcome set. And Delfy is a series of iterative surveys seeking consensus from a group of experts. Delfy was sent out to 70 lymphedema therapists and researchers across the globe, and that was informed by the outcomes that I observed in the clinic and from the research. Round 1 saw agreement on the primary outcomes for inclusion in a minimum outcome set, so they were bioimpedance, size change, palpated differences, visible differences, and patient symptom report. And the question on how size change could be represented over time wasn't resolved. So that was taken to the second round. Round 2 resulted in a refined list of descriptive terms, but still no consensus on how the outcome of size should be presented. There was, however, a preference for size shown as an interlimb difference displayed as a percentage. So the motivation for for defining a minimum outcome set was to create software to store, process and display those outcomes. The program is called LiamBased, and I've been assisted through the School of OT and it's the School of IT in its development. In addition to storing assessment data, it simplifies the data processing, releasing clinicians such as myself from the tyranny of mental arithmetic and minimising error. It displays normative ranges for bioimpedance and for circumferences. It displays a selection of graphs for visual display of change over time. And finally, by standardising the outcomes and reporting, it's hoped that opportunities to undertake research and combining data will be made easier. We already invest the time to collect this data, so it's really just a matter of making better use of it. Thank you.